The Lucifer effect. How good people turn evil. What if the evil we fear isn't some monster hiding in the shadows, but something that quietly lives within us all? We like to believe that we're good people, that our friends, our neighbors, the folks we laugh with, share coffee with, they're good too. But then one day, someone snaps. A horrible crime. A shocking act. And we hear it on the news. He was always so normal. And we wonder, how could they do that? What happened? Today, we're not just asking that question. We're going into the heart of it. Welcome to the world of the Lucifer effect, where the line between good and evil is far more fragile than we think, where the darkness begins. The term Lucifer effect was coined by a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo. He took inspiration from the biblical story of Lucifer, the brightest angel, cast down into hell. Once a symbol of light, now a name we associate with darkness. But Zimbardo wasn't interested in theology. He was focused on human behavior. He wanted to understand a terrifying truth. Why do good people do evil things? And to answer that, he didn't just write theories. He built an experiment that would go down in history, for all the wrong reasons. The Stanford Prison Experiment. Stanford University. Zimbardo transforms the basement of the psychology department into a mock prison. He recruits 24 college students, all normal, healthy, mentally stable young men. They're randomly assigned to one of two roles: guards or prisoners. No real crimes, no real power, just a simulation. What could go wrong? The first day feels awkward, almost playful. But by day 2, something strange begins to happen. The guards start inventing punishments. They shout, humiliate, force prisoners to do push-ups. One guard even makes a prisoner simulate sexual acts, for no reason, just because he could. The prisoners? They start breaking down emotionally, mentally, even physically. Some refuse to eat. Others beg to leave. One even has a full-on psychological meltdown and is pulled from the study. By day 6, the situation has spiraled. Zimbardo, now acting as the prison's superintendent, watches it unfold until his own girlfriend confronts him. She tells him, "What you're doing is wrong. You've changed." And just like that, the experiment is shut down. It was supposed to last 2 weeks. It didn't even survive one. The fallout. What shocked the world wasn't just what happened, but who it happened to. These weren't monsters. These were regular college students. Kids who listened to the Beatles and studied for finals, but when given power, anonymity, and a system that encouraged cruelty, they became something else. Zimbardo's conclusion? It's not just bad apples. It's the barrel, the system that holds them, that can turn anyone rotten. This was the birth of the Lucifer effect, the transformation of ordinary people into perpetrators of extraordinary evil, the 7-step descent into darkness. Let's take a step back. What happened in that mock prison, and what keeps happening in history, isn't just random chaos. It follows a pattern. Zimbardo didn't just stop at describing what he saw. He mapped it. 7 psychological steps that lead people, anyone, from decency to darkness. Let's break them down. And as we do, ask yourself a hard question. Would I be immune? Step 1. Dehumanization. Before cruelty comes distance. Before harm, there's always a moment where we stop seeing the other person as fully human. They become a label, a number, a uniform, a stereotype. In the Stanford experiment, prisoners weren't called by name. They were referred to by number. Prisoner 819, for example. And it made it easier for guards to ignore their pain. Because 819 isn't your friend. He's not a brother. He's just an object in a costume. This is the first crack in the moral mirror, and history is full of it. Step 2. Obedience to authority. Enter Stanley Milgram, another psychologist, another controversial experiment. In the 1960s, Milgram had volunteers deliver what they thought were painful electric shocks to strangers, just because a man in a lab coat told them to. Most of them did it. even when the victim screamed. Why? Because the order came from someone in charge. And our brains are wired, especially in structured societies, to obey those we see as higher in status. Authority gives us permission to ignore our conscience. Step 3. Conformity to group norms. We are social creatures. Fitting in is part of survival. So when we're in a group, even if that group is doing terrible things, we often go along with it. Not because we're evil, but because we're afraid of standing out. In the Stanford prison experiment, not all guards were abusive, but the quiet ones, the passive ones, allowed the worst behaviors to happen. And silence, too, is a choice. Step 4. Anonymity. You ever notice how people act online when they're behind a fake username? It's the same principle. When people feel invisible, they become more likely to act outside of their values. Masks, uniforms, sunglasses, darkness, all of them can create that sense of distance. In the experiment, guards wore reflective sunglasses. It made it harder for prisoners to make eye contact, harder to read emotions, and easier to forget that there's a real person behind the suffering. Step 5. Gradual escalation. Nobody wakes up and decides to commit evil. It happens slowly, in steps. A little cruelty today, a bit more tomorrow. It's called the foot in the door technique. Start with a small act, like making a prisoner do jumping jacks. Then push the boundary just a little further, like sleep deprivation. Before you know it, the behavior becomes normalized. And the scariest part, each step feels not that bad when you compare it to the last one. Displacement of responsibility. Have you heard this one? I was just following orders. It's not my fault. Someone else made the decision. This is psychological outsourcing. The moment you give your moral compass to someone else, you are capable of anything. It happened in Nazi Germany. It happened at Abu Ghraib. It happens in everyday workplaces, schools, even families. When no one takes responsibility, everyone becomes dangerous. Step 7. Moral justification. This is the final step, the most insidious of all. When we do something terrible, but convince ourselves it's for a greater good. I had to be harsh. It teaches them discipline. They're the enemy. They deserve it. This is how you maintain control. It turns cruelty into duty, pain into principle, and that is when the transformation is complete. Reflection. None of these steps on their own are shocking. Most of them are subtle, familiar, even ordinary. That's what makes them so dangerous. The Lucifereffect doesn't say we're born evil. It says we're vulnerable, especially when we stop paying attention, especially when we think that would never be me. Because evil doesn't always wear horns or announce itself with rage. Sometimes it whispers. It blends in. It grows, quietly. In the cracks of broken systems, unchecked power, and silent witnesses. The Lucifereffect in the real world. The Lucifereffect isn't just a theory. It's not something that only happens in psychological experiments or college basements. It's real. It's happened before. It's happening now. Let's look at 3 cases. Brutal, undeniable, and chilling. Where the line between ordinary people and evil actions was not just crossed, it was erased. Case 1. Abu Ghraib Prison, Iraq, 2003. Imagine this. A young woman in military uniform is smiling for the camera. In front of her is a naked man, blindfolded, curled on the floor like an animal. She's holding a leash attached to his neck. Another photo shows a pyramid of naked bodies. A US soldier gives a thumbs up beside them, like he's at a barbecue, not a war zone. These weren't elite torturers or lifelong criminals. They were low-ranking US soldiers, mostly in their early 20s. Reservists. Some worked in fast food or delivery before joining the military. So how did they become this? Enter the Lucifereffect. Because what you didn't see in those photos was the environment. Endless stress and sleep deprivation. No oversight. A power structure that encouraged control by any means. An us versus them mentality where prisoners were labeled as subhuman. Philip Zimbardo himself was brought in as an expert witness during the investigation. His conclusion? The system created the situation that allowed these crimes to happen. The people were the instruments. The barrel was rotten. But here's the twist. Only the individuals were punished, not the leaders, not the system. Another classic element of the Lucifer effect. Blame the apple, protect the barrel. Case 2. Nazi Germany, 1930s-40s. When we think of the Holocaust, we picture monsters. But the real horror? It wasn't monsters. It was millions of ordinary people. Train conductors, office clerks, doctors, teachers. People who played a role in transporting, processing, labeling, and even executing human beings. Systematically. In the Nuremberg trials, Nazi officers repeatedly said, "I was just following orders." And many of them truly believed it. Because by the time the full machine of evil was rolling, most individuals were only pulling one small lever. That's how it happens. Evil isn't one giant act. It's a system of tiny permissions, delegated, depersonalized, and morally reframed. Historian Hannah Arendt called it the banality of evil, the chilling idea that ordinary people can commit atrocities, not out of hatred, but out of duty, out of routine, out of apathy. That's Lucifer effect at full scale. Case 3. Rwanda, minus 1,994. Over the course of just 100 days, nearly 1 million people were slaughtered in Rwanda. Neighbor killed neighbor. Teachers turned on students. Families tore each other apart. And it wasn't a military campaign. It was civilians. Regular people, many of whom had shared communities, markets and schools for years. How? First, dehumanization. The Tutsi minority was called cockroaches on the radio, day and night. Second, conformity. Once the violence started, refusing to join meant being killed yourself. Third, anonymity and permission. With the government openly supporting the genocide, there was no one left to say stop. Again, not born evil, made evil by a perfect storm of hate, fear, and unchecked authority. The Lucifer effect didn't just show up here, it thrived. Mini-section. Lesser-known examples. It's not just war. The Lucifer effect creeps into offices, schools, online communities, anywhere power meets silence. Corporate scandals like Enron or Theranos, where silence and complicity destroyed lives. Online mobs that cancel or dox people with no due process, because anonymity makes cruelty easier. Bullying in schools where a group dynamic allows one kid to become the target of many. The stakes may be different, but the psychology is the same. Pause plus reflection. So what do all these stories have in common? In each one, the people doing harm weren't evil from the start. They were shaped slowly and visibly by a system that enabled it. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in steps. That's the terror. But also the truth that gives us power. If evil can grow, so can awareness. Could you turn evil? Let's stop talking about them for a moment. Let's talk about you. Not the idea of you. Not the version you show on Instagram. The real you? Alone, under pressure, afraid, confused, desperate to belong? Now let me ask you something. Do you believe you could hurt someone if someone told you to? Do you think you could ignore suffering if it made your life easier? Do you think you could become a villain? Most people say no, and that's what makes this part so dangerous. Because thinking you're immune is the very thing that makes you vulnerable. Scenario 1, the authority test. You're in a lab. A man in a white coat tells you to press a button. Behind a wall, someone screams. You hesitate. He says, "The experiment requires you to continue." Do you stop? This is not fiction. It was a real study, the Milgram experiment. Done in the 1960s, over 65% of participants went all the way. They believed they were giving lethal shocks to a stranger, not because they were cruel, but because they were told to, Because the man in the lab coat said it was okay.com? Still think you'd be in the 35%? Let's go deeper. Scenario 2, the group trap. You're in a group. 10 people are answering simple questions. The first 9 say the wrong answer. Clearly wrong. Now it's your turn. Do you say what's true, or do you conform? Another real experiment, the Ash conformity study, showed that 75% of people will knowingly give the wrong answer, just to fit in, not to gain anything, not to avoid pain, just to avoid being different, because belonging feels safer than truth. Scenario 3, the silent witness. You see something wrong? Maybe someone being harassed, someone being hurt. There are other people around. No one is doing anything. Do you step in? Most people freeze. They wait for someone else to act. This is called diffusion of responsibility, and it kills. In one famous case, a woman named Kitty Genovese was murdered in New York City. Over 30 people heard her screaming. No one helped. Later, they said, "I thought someone else would." So, could you? Here's the truth. If you're tired, scared, desperate for approval, if someone hands you a uniform, gives you orders, tells you it's for a greater good, you might. Maybe not always. Maybe not to the extreme, but the seed is there. It is in all of us, Tapa. And acknowledging that, that's not weakness. That's strength. Because when you accept the darkness inside you, you can start learning how to resist it. Mini reframe, the power of awareness. This section isn't here to shame you. It's here to wake you up. If you know how the system works, if you know the signs, you can choose differently. You can pause. Speak up. Say no. Be the person who stops the spiral, even when others won't. And that choice? That's real heroism. Resisting the Lucifer effect. We've talked about darkness, about the quiet, creeping process that turns ordinary people into villains. We've seen the patterns, the experiments, the atrocities. But now let's talk about the other side. The people who don't go along, the ones who say no, the ones who, even when the world goes mad, somehow stay human. How do they do it? 1. Self-awareness. Know your shadow. The first step is the hardest. Admitting that you are not immune, that you, like all of us, have the potential to be part of the problem. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest, and it gives you power. Because when you know what to watch for, authority pressure, dehumanizing language, blind conformity, you can choose differently. The people who resist evil, they're not perfect. They're just self-aware. 2. Personal responsibility. No more bystanders. The second step is taking responsibility, even when others don't. Remember this, evil thrives in silence. It grows when people look away, when they say it's not my problem. But every moment you speak up, every time you refuse to laugh at the cruel joke, every time you step in when someone is being targeted, you break the cycle. You become the kind of person the system can't control. 3. Critical thinking. Question everything. Never surrender your judgment. Not to a group, not to a uniform, not to a flag, not to a trend. Evil often wears a noble disguise. Security, tradition, efficiency, order, but those words mean nothing without ethics. Ask yourself, does this choice honor human dignity? If it doesn't, don't do it, even if everyone else does. 4. Empathy. Remember the face behind the label. If dehumanization is the first step toward evil, then empathy is the first defense against it. Look people in the eye. Say their names. Listen to their stories. The moment you see someone's full humanity, you can't hurt them the same way. Empathy is resistance. And in a world full of labels and categories, choosing to see the person is a radical act. 5. Courage. Be willing to stand alone. This is the hardest part. Sometimes, doing the right thing means standing alone. It means being the one who says, "This isn't okay," even when it's uncomfortable. even when it costs you something. But courage is contagious. When one person stands up, others follow. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be first. Closing message. So now we return to the question. Could you turn evil? The answer is yes, we all could. But that's not the whole story, because you could also be the one who stops it. The one who sees the warning signs. The one who says no, speaks up, takes the heat. You could be the one who refuses to follow the crowd, and instead leads it somewhere better. You are not powerless. The Lucifer effect shows us the worst, so we can become the best. Not by pretending we're above it, but by confronting it head on. So the next time the system whispers, just follow orders. Don't ask questions. It's not your job. You'll remember what's at stake, and you'll choose not the easy path, but the human one. If this video made you feel something, share it, comment with your thoughts, and take the time to reflect, not just on history, but on your own capacity for both good and evil. And remember, the line between light and shadow isn't out there. It runs through the center of every human heart, including yours. Stay awake, stay human, and stay brave.